So it's finally happened. NATO troops have officially landed in Greenland. And they're not there to stop Russia. They're not there to stop China. They're there to stop the President of the United States.
They are there because Donald Trump keeps talking about taking Greenland whether they like it or not. And Denmark finally decided that a press release wasn't enough anymore.
Let that sink in for a second. Denmark's prime minister spelled it out clearly. She said, and I quote, "The American ambition to take over Greenland is intact," and called it a fundamental disagreement with Washington. That is not normal language between allies. That's the kind of sentence that tells you that trust is already snapped.
So today we are going to walk through what's actually happening on that giant white chunk of ice on your map and why it suddenly matters this much to us and for NATO if Trump keeps pushing.
Yep, by the end of this, you'll know three things. What those troops are really doing, why this could literally blow up the NATO alliance, and how Greenland has quietly become the warning sign for the next decade.
Let's start with the landing itself. First, yes, European troops really did land in Greenland, but we need to be precise about what the force looks like. Germany is sending a reconnaissance team of 13. France is sending 15 mountain specialists. Sweden is sending 3 officers, Norway 2, the UK has 1 officer in the group, and the Dutch Navy is sending 1 as well.
Now, I know that sounds small, but that's the point. It's not an invasion force, it's a tripwire force. A Danish Air Force plane landed in Nuuk with personnel and fatigues, and French President Macron openly stated that France and the EU have to be unyielding in upholding territorial sovereignty. That's a direct message to the White House. And Denmark's defense ministry said, in plain language, that they're working with Arctic and European allies to figure out how to increase presence. Translation into non-bureaucratic English, we're not leaving the door open for you anymore.
At the same time, you have to remember the context, because you already have 200 U.S. troops on the ground in Greenland. So this isn't about militarizing Greenland from scratch. It's already strategic that way, but what's changed is who is standing where. One Arctic analyst said that Denmark put it perfectly. Message 1, if the U.S. tries anything militarily, we're ready to defend Greenland. Message 2, fine, we heard your critique about security. We're stepping up surveillance ourselves, so you don't have an excuse to come in and save it by owning it.
Now, how the heck did we get from Trump wants to buy Greenland memes to this could end NATO? Because this time, it's not just a goofy offer. Trump is now talking about taking Greenland the nice way or the more difficult way. Those are his actual words. You don't talk about the difficult way with an ally unless you're thinking about force.
Diplomatic attempts to fix this have completely failed. Just this week, Denmark's foreign minister and Greenland's foreign minister met J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio at the White House. It was supposed to lower the temperature, but instead, Denmark came out saying there is a fundamental disagreement. Greenland's foreign minister basically said, "We agree to disagree and we're setting up a working group."
That's diplomatic code for we got nowhere. A working group is just a delay tactic. While they're setting up committees, Trump goes straight back to the mic saying that the U.S. needs Greenland for national security, that Denmark can't protect it, and that all options are on the table.
But why? Why is the U.S. risking its most important alliance for this? Trump keeps telling people the U.S. has to own Greenland to stop Russia or China. He's pushing a missile defense project called the Golden Dome that he says depends on controlling Greenland. He argues that because American radar protects the continents, and America should own the land it sits on.
Denmark and Greenland point out 2 basic facts. 1, Greenland's already part of NATO, so if Russia or China tried anything, they'd be taking on the whole alliance. 2, the U.S. already has a base there and it can expand it under the 1951 Defense Agreement. In other words, if this was really about security, you don't need to annex the island.
The only thing ownership adds is direct control over the resources. As the ice melts, Greenland is revealing massive deposits of rare earth minerals. These are the minerals that you need to build iPhones, EVs, batteries, and fighter jets. Right now, China controls that market. Trump wants to break China's monopoly, and he sees Greenland as the solution. He has essentially told his advisors, why are we letting Denmark sit on our lithium?
And this is where it gets existential. NATO was built on one core idea, Article 5. If you attack one member, you attack all. But Article 5 assumes the bad guy is outside the club. Now imagine the country doing the attacking is the United States, The nuclear superpower that's supposed to be the backbone of everyone else's defense.
A U.S. military takeover of Greenland would be unprecedented. One NATO member seizing another member's territory by force? Unbelievable. One Eastern European official literally called it an earthquake situation with the risk of destroying NATO. That is not the language you use if you think this is just Trump blowing off steam.
And think about the signal. If the US can tear up the rules, grab a piece of Denmark, and stay in NATO anyway, what does the alliance even mean anymore? One former NATO strategist said it flat out. NATO's credibility is already collateral damage. Trump has inserted doubt about US commitment that won't be forgotten. And that's why NATO officials are scrambling to build an alternative Arctic strategy, so Trump doesn't have an excuse to act alone. But since NATO works by consensus, Trump can veto the very fix that they're trying to build.
And while the military plays chicken in the Arctic, Brussels has quietly picked up a very sharp stick. Trade. The European Parliament is now talking about freezing parts of the US-EU trade deal. They're pausing votes on lifting tariffs until Trump backs off Greenland. 23 lawmakers wrote to the Parliament president saying, how can we hand Trump a trade win while he's threatening to seize an ally's territory?
And that is huge. Greenland is now derailing lobster duties and steel talks. One MEP said the argument for the deal was stability, and Trump keeps proving chaos is the only thing on offer. So Europe is finally asking, why are we rewarding this behavior?
And amidst all of the geopolitics, we have to listen to what Greenlanders actually want. In the last poll, only 6% of Greenlanders wanted to be a part of the U.S. 85% were against it, and a Greenlandic writer described the situation as plans for the forceful theft of indigenous land, which it is. People are literally prepping in case of an invasion. This isn't abstract for them. It's, will a foreign army try to take my home?
Okay, Canada. Where do we fit in all of this mess? Well, we're an Arctic country. We share NORAD with the US. We sit in NATO. And our coastline isn't that far from the place that Trump is circling on his mental real estate map. If NATO fractures over Greenland, our eastern flank and Arctic defense suddenly look a lot shakier.
Denmark already runs a joint Arctic command. Canada doesn't get to pretend this is someone else's problem. We have the Northwest Passage. For decades, the U.S. has refused to admit that those waters belong to Canada. They call it an international strait. We call it internal Canadian waters. Usually we just agree to disagree.
But if Trump establishes a precedent that strategic American interests override borders in the Arctic, then the Northwest Passage is gone. Imagine U.S. Coast Guard breakers escorting oil tankers through the Canadian Arctic without asking permission. What is Ottawa going to do? Shoot at them? Pfft. If Denmark folds, Canada's Arctic sovereignty effectively evaporates.
So we have choices to make. Do we stand clearly with Denmark and Greenland? Do we finally invest in Arctic defense like we mean it? Or do we keep hoping that this will all blow over? Because that's what this really is. A stress test on the whole system that we've been living under for decades.
So, has war been cleared? No, not yet. But something huge has been stated out loud. Denmark and Greenland have said, our territory is not for sale, not for conquest, and not for your missile branding exercise.
And European allies have said, if you go down that road, you're not just picking on a small country, you're risking the alliance that protects an entire continent. NATO officials are quietly admitting that its credibility is now on the line, not because of Russia this time, but because of a U.S. president who wants to expand territory for the sake of power.
And for Canada, the question is simple. Do we treat this as a distant fight over an island, or do we finally act like an Arctic country whose security and values are tied to what happens there? And for Americans, do you want your country to be remembered as the ally that defended democracy, or the one that tried to annex it from its own friends?
Because if Trump ever orders a move on Greenland, it won't just be a land grab. It'll be the moment NATO's future and the whole post-war security order gets thrown into the shredder. That's why those European troops are on the ground right now, not to start a fight, but to draw a line before one starts.
So yes, they landed. But the real question is whether we're smart enough to hear what that landing actually means. So let us know in the comments. Should Canada send troops to stand with Denmark, or is that too risky for us?
We are going to be watching the skies over Greenland every single day this week. This is a Hinge moment. We might look back at January 2026 as the moment the West fell apart, or the moment Europe finally stood up.
And let's be honest, mainstream news is too afraid to call this what it is, a standoff between allies. That's why independent channels like ours matter. If you want us to keep tracking the troop movements and the real diplomatic cables, please hit like and consider joining the A-Team.
Your support lets us stay focused on the map, not the clickbait. We are posting the full breakdowns of which units are landing where over on Substack. And we want you to take on the Alliance Crisis over on Facebook as well.
The troops have landed. The line is drawn in the snow. Now we wait to see who blinks.
All of the links are below that you can check out. But for now, stay safe and thanks for watching.
We'll see you on the next one. Ciao for now.